Welcome everyone to a new Border and Globalization podcast. Today, the main topic is the social justice and ecosystem challenges of the US-Mexico border or Mexico-US border. This border faces challenges like border security's impact on communities and shared environmental issues such as water management. Innovative policies are needed to ensure equity and sustainability. These issues shape the social and ecological future of this borderland region. To better understand the social justice and environmental dynamics of the US-Mexico border, we are delighted today to welcome Irasema Coronado, Professor of Political Science and Director of the School of Transborder Studies at the Arizona State University. Among other publications, Irasema co-authored Fronteras No Más Towards Social Justice at the US-Mexico border and has extensively researched binational governance and environmental cooperation. Welcome on board, Professor Coronado.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this podcast. I'm delighted to be here.
So this podcast is divided into two parts. The first part explores social justice challenges at the US-Mexico border, and the second part examines environmental issues caused by the border. Let's start our first part. My first question is this one, Irasema. Like all border regions, the US-Mexico border has a rich and complex history shaped by cultural, economic, and geopolitical dynamics. Can you describe, please, the fundamental characteristics of the US-Mexico border region today?
Okay, I would say that the US-Mexico border region is very interdependent, and I know that the press highlights the quote-unquote problems at the border, but there's also a lot of integration and interdependence on the border. And I'll start with any major border city like Laredo, Nuevo Laredo, Juarez, El Paso, Nogales, Mexicali, Calexico. There are, first of all, families that reside on both sides of the border. So there's a lot of family integration, a lot of families that have binational lives that come and go, that cross the border in a seamless manner, that shop binationally, that are culturally, linguistically integrated into both countries, that have experience with higher education on both sides of the border, that sometimes have businesses on both sides of the border. So there's a lot of family integration. There's also a lot of economic interdependence because many of the US border cities rely on Mexican shoppers to come to the US side and purchase goods and services. So a lot of businesses rely on Mexican shoppers for their livelihood. Coupled with that is the fact that many people pay taxes on the goods and services that they purchase. And those taxes fund local government. And whenever you see a decline due to either a devaluation or strict border enforcement or long lines at the border, businesses suffer, and at the same time, the local governments suffer because they are not receiving the income based on the sales tax that they would otherwise receive. Mm-hmm. And we know that some communities, like during COVID, we noted that in El Paso and in Nogales, the city of El Paso and the city of Nogales were pretty strapped because they did not have the extra income in their coffers to provide the services to their citizens, whether it's library services or police security or fire services. They had to cut back on providing services. So I would say that the border is economically interdependent. It's integrated because you have so many families that come and go and seamlessly navigate this border And at the same time, you have a lot of restrictions, a lot of barriers to this cross-border integration and cooperation that we so desperately need in border communities.
Thank you very much for this answer, Irasema. As you have said, the residents of the US-Mexico border region are crossing border for different purposes, the families, the businesses, but also they navigate a unique way of life shaped by security challenges and shifting policies. What can you tell us about their daily lives and, in particular, how they adapt to the instability of public policies and regulations?
Well, border residents are very creative and they certainly know how to navigate the border for the benefit of their family. So let me give you two examples that you very seldom hear about. There are a lot of people in the United States that do not have medical insurance, that require medical care, and how they achieve their health care is by crossing the border. So there are many doctors, dentists, optometrists, dermatologists, clinics that rely on many people from the United States crossing their border to go see the dentist, to go see the doctor, and to buy their prescription medication because in some instances it is a lot more reasonable than buying it in the United States, even with insurance. So a lot of people really benefit from that cross-border activity and the utilization of medical services across the border, which really enhance their quality of life. Because if you can't afford a doctor in the United States, you then, postpone getting care, you don't take your medication, or you cut it in half and don't get the full effect. And by going to Mexican doctors, utilizing Mexican pharmacies, you're able to improve your health outcomes. So there's a lot of that goes on. There's also a lot of people that are really good binational shoppers, and they can tell you, I buy these products in Mexico and I buy these products in the United States. So you have a lot of people from the United States taking advantage of groceries that are in some instances cheaper in Mexico. Not everything, but a lot of things are. And also services like getting haircuts, like going to the seamstress, like getting your dry cleaning, things like that. It is a lot cheaper in some instances in Mexico than it is in the United States. So if you're a binational consumer, you can really maximize your resources and have a better economic outcome by using the border economy to your benefit. And likewise, you have a lot of people from Mexico who come to the US to purchase things that are cheaper or that they prefer to buy. And also, there's a lot of informal economy. There are a lot of people that come to the US, they shop, and then they go back and they sell it to people who cannot cross the border. And so they have their own little business going of this cross-border economy that seems to work for everybody.
Okay, thank you very much, Irasema, for all these precisions. Let's speak now about the urban transborder region called El Paso-Ciudad Juarez. This city is often described as a quintessential borderland. What defines this region and what are its key challenges and dynamics?
Well, Ciudad Juarez and El Paso are a large urban center. And if you look at it from on top of a hill in El Paso, there's an area that has this beautiful lookout. And if you are new to the community, you have a really hard time uh, finding where the border is because it's just this big urban mass.
Yeah.
And those of us that have been there for a while, I lived there for 20 years, you can tell where the border is. But for the untrained eye, they're like, oh my God, where is the border? Let me see where it is, right? And so it's very interesting. It's very integrated. But again, it's integrated because there's a lot of family that transcends the border, and there are a lot of businesses. At one point, when we were doing the research for the Fronteras No Más book, we had an estimate that there were 5,000 people every day from El Paso crossing the border to work in Ciudad Juarez. We could never confirm that data. We tried to with the Chamber of Commerce, we tried to with other entities, and we could never quantify how many people from El Paso crossed the border to Juarez to work. Likewise, we know that there are many people from Juarez who cross the border to El Paso who take care of children, who take care of the elderly, who have landscape businesses, who have other services that they provide. I mean, I know of veterinarians that cross the border and provide care to pets in El Paso out of their car. And it's a lot cheaper, it's more accessible. It's a win-win for them, it's a win-win for people. But of course, this kind of activity is not quote unquote legal, but it's not really hurting anyone. In many ways, it's benefiting both parties. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. It's a win-win border for some aspects and win-win cross-border relations for some aspects of the life there.
Yes. And it's really a truly integrated city. There's a lot of people that, have lived there all of their lives, and many people have a home in Juarez and they have a home in El Paso, and they come and go, and they have all kinds of interactions culturally. They attend, social and cultural events on both sides of the border. There's a lot of integration in El Paso and Ciudad Juarez.
Thank you, Irasema. Let's move on the topic about social justice challenges. Uh, this border is the location where governance involves both nations and also local actors. And I have a question about the regulatory and governance power in this complex borderland. Who holds authority in this borderland region? And can we talk about transnational political elites who shape border policies?
Yes, let me give you a classic example. When the US government planted the idea that there could be trusted travelers, like a global entry program, the business community that works and lives in El Paso and Juarez, these are people who own companies in Mexico or who live in El Paso and go to work in Juarez. They wanted to take advantage of this new global entry policy. And so
Mhm.
they raised the funds to create a dedicated lane, which is known as the Sentry Lane or the Nexus Lane, kind of like the Canadian version of it.
Mhm.
And they paid for it. They paid for it because it really cut back on their commute time. And so they could cross the border in 10, 15 minutes as opposed to 1 or 2 hours. And so they do have a role to play. I also know of many companies and business owners whose products are stuck in line waiting to cross the US-Mexico border. And, for many business people, you want things just in time. You want things delivered in a timely manner. And they have the wherewithal to call members of Congress, to call CBP, and to say, open up more lanes, get my trucks through so that my products can get to the market. I know that that happens. Likewise, during the holiday season, when a lot of the local businesses in El Paso see an influx of Mexican consumers and shoppers, they, the business community, along with the Chamber of Commerce and the city of El Paso, they all got together and they agreed to pay the overtime for the CBP agents to work longer hours and open more gates so that people could cross quickly, so that they could go shop. So there is a role where transnational political elites are active in shaping border policies, in making sure that there's trade routes that are efficient and quick so that people can get their products to market. And of course, they do play a role in that kind of policy making on the border.
Thank you, Professor Irasema. Uh, in 1994, you explored the concept of the hardening of the US-Mexico borderlands. What did this term mean at the time, and how has its significance evolved today?
Okay, so I need to tell you a little bit of a story here. I
Yeah,
grew up
please,
on the
please.
US-Mexico. Okay, I grew up on the US-Mexico border in Nogales, Arizona, and I grew up in a very binational, bilingual, bicultural family. Back in the day when I was growing up, my mother would cross the border sometimes 5 or 6 times a day because it was easy. It was like going from one side of town to the other. We would cross to visit friends. We would cross to go buy something. We'd cross to someone to go get, medical care. For whatever reason, my mother crossed the border back and forth to the point where the immigration officer would say, Mrs. Coronado, how are you today? Other than your 6 children, what are you bringing today? And my mother would say, oh, today I have pan dulce, today I have candy, today I have tequila, today I have cheese and tortillas, whatever. And so obviously, when I was growing up, it was a completely different border and things changed. And I remember very vividly the day that John Kennedy was assassinated, because that was really the day when the border was closed. And I remember this vividly because I remember the concern in my family about make sure that you don't cross, no one should go because, they're going to close the border and then what are we going to do? So I remember that. Over time, of course, the border has become hardened. You had more of a military presence. You had a change in the uniforms of the Customs and Border inspectors. I remember the Customs and Border inspectors used to wear shirts with a tie, and it was kind of like this welcoming you to the country, welcome you home. Obviously, that has changed. If you look at their uniforms now, they look more like military fatigues. They look more like people going to combat zones. They're not the welcoming sort of feeling that I used to get when I was a child crossing the border. So obviously the border has become hardened. It has become militarized in many ways. And I think that now, with the wall that has been built, and according to this administration, is going to be reinforced and expanded, it's becoming, more and more difficult to navigate the border. And the one thing I have to say is that borderlanders who are binational, who are bilingual, who are bicultural, and who have the practice and experience of navigating the border, they figure things out. They can tell you this is the time to cross, this is the time to do this, this is the time, don't go on this day, go on that day, because they have so much experience in navigating that they're able to do this. So the resilience of the borderlanders to me, it in some ways helps people navigate this hardening of the border. But it is something that I wish would change because I do believe that back in the day when you had this easier transition of coming and going across the border, life was a lot better for many border people.
Thank you, Irasema. And thank you very much for sharing this background, your personal background. Um, you spoke about the wall, and my next question is about this infrastructure. The US-Mexico border region has faced the construction of a massive wall, and this border wall has disrupted the social and economic life of US-Mexico border communities, even though some borderlanders are creative about that. But how has it impacted this war, the daily lives in this region? Could you share with us some of your insights, please?
For people who are unable to obtain a visa or a work permit or some document that allows them to cross the border legally, that the wall has really had an effect on them because there were people, I remember this as a child in Nogales, and I remember when I first got to El Paso and Juarez, there were people who would enter without the benefit of appropriate documentation through different areas along the border because it was pretty much open. So once the border wall was built, that really affected their ability to do that. And so many people that had informal economy jobs in El Paso and in Nogales had to stop doing that because they just could not expose themselves to walking farther to enter in an area. And then, of course, with more military and more Border Patrol presence, the chances that you would be, caught were real. Also, I think with the wall has also come a lot of technology. There are a lot of cameras, there are a lot of sensors, there are a lot of lights that also has an impact not just on people, but also on the wildlife of the US-Mexico border region. And of course, when I see the wall, I have to tell you, my heart hurts
Mm.
because it used to be that it was a chain link fence and you could see the other side. And now you can't. You see this big barrier that is like, wow, why did we have to build this here,
Mm.
in this community? And to me, it's painful to watch. It really is.
Yes,
And it does affect daily lives. It really does. And also, it's led to the death of many people because when people are desperate and they're in need and they want to cross, they take um, longer, they walk farther in very, hot weather to attempt to enter in an area where they can at least enter the United States only to maybe be picked up by the Border Patrol. Many of them put their lives at risk, and many people have died trying to cross the border through the border wall.
yes, and this border is also the location of the Rio Grande, and this big river is also a part of the danger of this border. When you cross this border, you cross this massive Rio Grande River, and sadly is not the case for all the people on the move. And I have a question, Irasema, about how the people from the south of the border, from the Mexican people, the borderlanders, but from Mexico, are thinking about the flows of people on the move who are coming from the south to try to cross the Rio Grande or to cross this wall and to cross this border. What are their feelings? If you could give us some information about that, Irasema.
Well, Mexico has enough problems of its own with poverty, with inequality, with corruption, with drug trafficking, with a lack of a social safety net. So they have enough problems. And when you have new people that enter the picture, for some people, and I've heard both versions, I have to tell you, because I've interviewed a lot of people that have migrated from Guatemala, from Honduras, from El Salvador, from Haiti, from Venezuela, from Colombia, from Ecuador, and they will tell you, oh my God, the Mexican people are so generous, so hospitable, so warm. It was wonderful to be able to receive their support, to see how they helped us in time of need, how they provided shelter and food and comfort when I needed it the most. I have heard that. I have also heard the anti-immigrant sentiment, which is palpable, I have to tell you, throughout the world. It is a worldwide phenomena, the anti-immigrant sentiment. And there are people who articulate the mayors, past mayors of Juarez, past mayor of Tijuana, have clearly articulated we do not want more people here. They need to go back to their country. They're taking advantage of our schools. They're taking advantage of our social services, and they're taking jobs away from Mexicans. It's very much the same rhetoric that you hear in the United States about the immigrants coming here, right? And so I've heard both sides that Mexicans are caring, compassionate, welcoming the immigrant, but I've also seen that there is a strong anti-immigrant sentiment. When we were doing the research for the Fronteras No Más book, there was an Veracruzano movement. Veracruz had suffered a devastating hurricane, and a lot of people had migrated to the north. And there was this talk of having a border patrol, a Mexican border patrol that would stop people from entering Ciudad Juarez. And the mayor of Juarez wrote a letter to the governor of Veracruz saying, what do you need to do to keep your people at home? Because here they're causing problems, they're begging, they're in poverty. Women are prostituting themselves to survive. It's causing a problem here. Do something to keep your people at home. So it is a very much a, love-hate relationship, I would say, with the presence of migrants in the community. But that's replicated all over the world, I have to say.
Yes, it's true. Thank you, Irasema, for these precisions. Um, the US-Mexico border wall and the stricter 2025 security and deportation policies have deeply affected people on the move and also the local communities. What is the real day-to-day situation for the families, the women, and the children living along the border, Irasema?
Okay, so let's look at the deportation process from the US side. Okay, so you've been in the United States. There are people that have been here for 20 and 30 years that have lived here without the benefit of documents. They've lived here undocumented. And for them to be able to navigate life here without documents means that they're pretty resilient and pretty strong and hardworking people. Because if you don't work, you cannot, contrary to what the politicians in this administration say, you cannot access social services at all. So you have hardworking people that now have children, in some cases grandchildren, and now they run the risk of being deported. What we see now, and what I see with my research now, is there's a lot of conflict in families. There are families who believe that you need to pick up your things and self-deport so that you don't end up in a jail in El Salvador or being sent to an African country or being sent someplace else where you cannot control your own destiny. There are other people who are anxious about renewing their green cards because even though they've been here for a long time, many people are being quote unquote picked up when they go for their appointment to renew their green card. And that's causing a lot of anxiety. Do you go? Do you not go? Do you take a lawyer with you? Do you use a family resource to pay for this lawyer? Do you just gamble and just show up and see what happens? It's really difficult. And there are families that have left. There are children whose US born children whose parents have taken them back to Mexico saying, we just can't live this way. This is not sustainable anymore. And so right now, I could say that there's conflict. Sometimes the mom wants to stay, the dad wants to leave. In other families, it's vice versa. And so it's really a hard time right now. But the deportation process is very difficult for people. Once they're in Mexico, many of them don't speak Spanish. Many of them don't speak Spanish well. Many of them don't have any family. Many of them don't, they left Mexico 20, 30 years ago. They don't have documents. They don't know how life works there. It's very difficult to integrate into Mexican society after being in the US for so long. So it's a painful process all around. And there are support services. The Kino Border Project provides some support. The Mexican government is trying to provide support. But then there's this backlash of, oh, you're giving these deportees access to jobs. They left, we stayed. Why can't you help me find a job? So
Mhm.
there is that resentment as well. And the schools are being challenged right now because they don't have the resources, they don't have the training to educate kids that have been in US schools that may or may not speak Spanish or read Spanish. And they're like, oh, these kids don't speak Spanish. How can we teach them? So it's a challenge for sure. And in my book that I co-edited with my colleague Alejandra Joshowitz, published by the University of Arizona Press on migrant childhoods, we cover that quite extensively, how the deportation process affects children on both sides of the border.
Thank you very much, Irasema, for these details. We have reached the end of the first part of the podcast, but I would like to ask you a last question about the interactions between the social justice challenges and the US-Mexico border. What could you say? How could you summarize this complex situation?
Wow, that's a challenge. I
Perfect.
think that people are resilient. People learn to navigate the system. I think that, income inequality is an issue. The border region is characterized as being poor. I wish people had better paying jobs. I wish people had better benefits with their jobs,
Mm.
access to health care, insurance, things of the kind. And it's a interesting, wonderful place to raise a family if you want them to have a bilingual, bicultural, binational lifestyle. But it does have limitations in terms of opportunities and economic well-being.
Thank you very much, Irasema Coronado. See you later for the second part.